A little girl from a small town in Idaho went to school and never came back. Her parents were devastated by their loss and didn't know what to do next. But after 2 years, her mom zooms in on Google Maps and sees something shocking. The sun came in through the curtains of the simple Airbnb in a town of New York on a Sunday afternoon. Rachel Warren sat on the couch in the living room with her laptop open on the coffee table. She had been traveling for a long time, and her eyes were tired. At age 36, she walked like someone who had been holding their breath for too long. 2 years, to be exact. As Daniel paced the small living room on his phone, she said, "Yes, we just got to New York." Daniel was 39 years old, and his face had deep stress lines that had been there for 2 years. It was Rachel who barely paid attention to her husband's talk with the police. "We're ready to start the investigation." "Yes, we can come to the station today." Instead, she looked at her laptop screen and typed in the address Daniel had given her on the phone. When Google Maps loaded, it showed them how to get from their Airbnb to the police station. "They said they'd be ready for us in about an hour," Daniel said as he hung up the phone and ran his hand through his becoming gray hair. "I'm just looking at the area," Rachel said as she moved the map around. They had no idea what New York was like. Their house was in Pine Hollow, an Idaho small town where everyone knew each other and kids could walk to school alone. Tragedies like theirs didn't happen there until they did. Eugene, their daughter, went missing 2 years ago after going to a baptism class at their church. The last time anyone saw her, she was walking across the street with some friends to where they usually hang out. She never got home. After that, the search took over their lives, changed their marriage, and put their faith to a greater test than either of them could have imagined. Rachel scrolled through the map to get a feel for the area around their temporary home. They picked this Airbnb because it was close to Bryant Park, which they found thanks to a tip. The person who gave their name was very clear. Rachel said, more to herself than to Daniel, they saw a girl who looked like Eugene at a homeless community event near Bryant Park. It was the first good lead they had seen in months. The previous tips had not helped. Each one had given them hope at first, but then dashed those dreams later. However, this call seemed different, real enough to make the cross-country trip worth it, even though it might have been just another wild rabbit chase. Rachel looked at the digital map some more and was pulled to the area around Bryant Park. There were a few small churches spread out in the area, she noticed. "There are a lot of churches here," she said, sounding a little better. "I was afraid I wouldn't be able to make it to service while we were here," she said. Daniel nodded and put his toiletry bag on the kitchen bar. Rachel knew what was bothering him. Dan, who used to be a devout Christian, stopped going to church after Eugene went missing. He couldn't handle the hurtful questions, looks of sympathy, and religious cliches that didn't help bring their daughter back. Rachel, on the other hand, had held on to her faith more tightly. She worked as an administrator at a church in Pine Hollow and found comfort in prayer, even though she was having doubts. "I've booked us for 2 weeks," she said, "but we can extend if we need to." Daniel sat down next to her on the couch, and his weight made the cushions sink. Rachel showed him the police station, Bryant Park, and the different buildings she had found when he said, "Let me see what you found. I think we're off to a good start." "Let's look at the street view," Daniel said, taking over the touchscreen. Rachel asked as he moved through the virtual streets. "I want to see what this Bryant Park looks like." She saw the familiar blue figure drag through the digital version of their search area. First, they looked at the neighborhood park. Then, they started walking around the streets nearby. Rachel said, "That's Mole Street," as they turned onto a homey road that ended in a small church. As they got closer to the church, Daniel zoomed in even more. That's when Rachel saw it, a girl in a pink hoodie walking with a man, while the Google camera car watched. "Daniel," Rachel said, but her voice got stuck in her throat. She poked at the screen with her finger. "Look," she said, pointing to the pink hoodie with the small design on the back. It was the exact same one Eugene was wearing the day she went missing. Rachel bought it for her 11th birthday, which was only 3 weeks ago. She could remember it like a brand. "Honey, turn it around," she begged, her heart beating fast. "Check to see if we can see their faces." Daniel played with the settings to try to get a better view, but the faces were blurry because that's how Google Maps Street View works. They were only seen in a few shots, and when they were, it was always from behind or at an angle that didn't give any clear information. Rachel whispered as she leaned closer to the TV, That man looks like someone I know. Daniel let out a sigh and slouched his shoulders. Rachel, this is the 100th time you've spotted a girl in a pink hoodie. You become fixated on that outfit. But I know how badly you want to find her, he said in a soft voice. Yes, I do, Rachel replied. But we can't jump at every pink sweater we see. Rachel marked all the interesting spots on the map and locked her laptop. Daniel was right. They shouldn't act on impulse, but instead follow a plan. They had a plan. Daniel stood up and said, "Let's go. Let's not waste any more daylight. First, we'll go to the station, talk to the police, and get permission to put up missing person posters. Then, we'll go to Bryant Park with an officer and look around." Rachel agreed and took the stack of freshly printed posters out of their suitcase. Each one showed Eugene's happy face, her bright eyes, her long hair, and information about how she got lost. After 2 years of putting these signs up, they had. Rachel's heart was worn down, but she wasn't giving up. She was unable to. As they walked to their car, Rachel couldn't get rid of the thought of the pink jacket on Mole Street. She told herself, "A mother knows, a mom always knows." Rachel was careful as she drove through New York streets she didn't know, following the blue line on the GPS on her phone. Daniel sat next to her and looked over the notes they had made for the cops. "Turn right at the next light," the voice from the robots said. Rachel noticed they were going by Bryant Park as they got closer to the intersection. "Look," she said. She spoke more slowly. "That's the park from the tip." Even in the late afternoon, the park was full of life. There were kids playing and couples walking hand in hand. There was also a small group of people gathered near a gazebo, which could have been a community event like the one mentioned in the tip. Rachel wanted to stop, go outside, look at everyone, and call Eugene's name until she could no longer speak. Daniel kindly reminded her, "We'll come back later." He knew what she was thinking. "We might not be able to do it on our own. We need trained eyes to help us." Rachel reluctantly agreed and kept driving. But as they got closer to the next turn, she saw a sign for Mole Street. She made a sign and turned without thinking. Daniel asked with more anger in his voice, "What are you doing?" Rachel kept her eyes on the road and said, "This is the wrong way. I want to visit the church we saw on Google Maps, just for a moment." Daniel said, "Rachel, I need to pray," but they both knew that wasn't real. Daniel leaned back against the headrest and looked angry. "Just a short prayer before we talk to the police. There won't be a service at this time of day. We're wasting precious time. You can pray in the car. God will hear you regardless. He's not confined to church buildings." His voice had a hint of bitterness. "You know that doctrine well enough." Rachel didn't say anything as she looked around the street for a pink jacket or a familiar face. In the late afternoon, the street was empty. Daniel kind of asked, "You just wanted to check out the street, didn't you? Where you saw that girl walking?" "I know you, Rachel, but you won't find them there. Those were just past satellite images." "I know," Rachel said in a low voice. "But I just felt this pull I can't explain. The police will always be at the station, but I needed to respond to this call in my heart." Daniel looked at his wife's face and noticed the set of her jaw that he had grown used to seeing for 2 years. He knew when to push and when to give up, and he knew this was one of the times to give up. The church, a small brick house with a white cross over the door, was seen. Rachel stopped her car in the almost empty parking lot and turned off the engine. "I'll wait outside," Daniel said as he took his seatbelt off. Rachel saw him get out of the car, his tall frame slouched a bit. "I need some fresh air, and to let the police know we'll be a little late, the weight of their joint load." They used to move together perfectly, and their marriage was like a dance where they helped and understood each other. Now, they often felt like strangers going through the same loss together, and each was dealing with their grief in ways that the other couldn't fully understand. She pulled out her purse and the small Bible she always carried with her. Eugene had engraved her 10th birthday name on the leather cover of the Bible. Rachel read every day and prayed fervently into the pages of this book, so the binding was worn. As Rachel got closer to the church door, she felt both scared and strangely sure of herself. She couldn't explain how she felt, not to Daniel or to herself, but something had pulled her to this place. Whether it was divine direction or the instincts of a mother, she was going to do what it said. The heavy wooden door was opened by her, and she went inside. She left Daniel to call the police across the street to say sorry. The cool, dark room felt like an old friend greeting her. Even though this city was strange, the smell of candles and polished wood made them feel better. Inside the church, it was quiet. Sunlight came in through stained glass windows and painted the wooden chairs in bright patterns. Rachel stood there for a moment to let her eyes get used to the lower light after being outside in the sun all afternoon. One of the pews was being cleaned by a middle-aged guy in casual clothes. He was using a cloth to carefully wipe down the wood. There were no people in the audience, which supported Daniel's guess about when services would be held. Rachel walked up slowly, and the sound of her steps filled the empty church. "Excuse me," she said in a low voice. The man raised his head and smiled at her. "Hello. May I assist you?" Rachel asked as she took out her phone. "I want to know more about a girl and a man I saw in this area," he said. She opened Google Maps and showed him the saved blurry street view picture. This person looked at the screen with squinting eyes and asked, "I know it's not very clear, but I was wondering if you might recognize them." He was focused, as shown by the furrowed face. "It's hard to tell because the pictures are blurry, but they look like they know each other." He gave her the phone back. Rachel wasn't sure how much to tell a stranger when she asked, "Are they friends of yours?" "I'm looking for my daughter. She hasn't been seen in 2 years, and I'm following every lead." The man's face changed into one of pity. "I'm so sorry to hear that." Two men walked out of a back room before he could finish. They were talking, and both of them were wearing the distinctive collars that Protestant preachers wear. As Rachel looked at the second guy, her breath got stuck in her throat. She quickly told the worker, "Thank you for your help," and then she went to talk to the two priests. When she got close, the priest in the formal robe noticed her and stopped talking. Rachel put out her hand and said, "Yes, hello. Good afternoon. Can I help you?" Rachel, Pastor Graham, the guy in the picture, introduced himself and shook her hand. "I was just admiring your beautiful church. I'm a senior pastor here. This is Evangelist Matthew, who's been guest preaching for us these past 2 weeks." "Evangelist Matthew," she said in a voice that was almost whispery. Before his face cleared, the minister looked at her with a blank look on his face. "I'm sorry. Have we met?" Rachel moved toward him. "I'm Rachel Warren from Pine Hollow, Idaho. I work at First Protestant Church there. I was part of the team that invited you to preach at our Sunday service a few years ago." She smiled, trying to remind him. "I arranged your accommodations and helped with all the logistics for your visit." St. Matthew, the evangelist, kept looking at her with a polite sense of confusion. Rachel kept going. "You led our prayer group and did an altar call. A woman in a wheelchair was healed. It was quite remarkable. Everyone talked about it for months." A flash of recognition, or what looked like recognition, went across his face. "Yes, Rachel Warren, of course. That was such a blessed event," he said with a big smile. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, doesn't he? I never forget a healing, though sometimes the faces of those who assist blur together after so many church visits." Rachel agreed, knowing that Matthew, as a traveling missionary, would go to a lot of churches every year. "It's a pleasure to see you again. Are you serving here now, just a guest pastor?" Matthew spoke with a warm, sure tone of voice. "I'm here for 2 weeks before continuing my church tour. Today is my last day. I'll be preaching at the evening service tonight, and then taking a flight out of New York at night." Rachel said, "What a crazy coincidence to meet you here," but she wasn't sure if it was really a coincidence, which may have led her to this church in the first place, God's hand leading her steps. Yes, Matthew did agree. "What brings you to New York, so far from home?" Rachel's smile broke. "My daughter, Eugene. She went missing 2 years ago, shortly after your visit to our church. In fact, she took one of the pictures out of her bag and unfolded it to show them Eugene's picture. We received a tip that someone saw a girl matching her description near Bryant Park. My husband and I came immediately." Evangelist Matthew looked at the picture with a blank look on his face for a moment. He seemed to stiffen up a bit, but Rachel wasn't sure if she was seeing things. Pastor Graham walked over to Rachel and put a calming hand on her arm. "Oh, my dear, what a terrible ordeal for your family. Let us pray together for Eugene's safe return." The pastor grabbed Rachel's hand and led the 3 of them in a small circle. After he thought about it for a moment, Evangelist Matthew joined. Pastor Graham led a prayer from the heart for Eugene's safety and for God to help with the search. Evangelist Matthew walked up to Rachel and hugged her when they were done. At first, the hug was friendly, but then it got tighter, like he was holding her in place. In a bad mood, he seemed to take a big breath as if he were smelling her. The action didn't seem like it belonged, and wasn't at all like the comforting hug of a spiritual leader. As they went their different ways, Rachel saw something odd. There was what looked like a picture in Matthew's breast pocket, which could only be seen partly for a split second. Even though the picture was looking inward, Rachel could see what looked like the outline of a young girl because the paper was so thin. Before she could think about what she had seen, Matthew straightened his jacket and quickly tucked the picture deeper into his pocket when he saw that one of the edges was sticking out. "A picture of my daughter," he said calmly. As Rachel tried to hide her unease, she said, "I carry it everywhere. She's always in my heart." The figure looked like it was from before. Way too familiar. Pastor Graham told her, "We'll definitely talk about your daughter with our congregation at tonight's service. Many eyes are better than few when searching for someone." "Thank you," Rachel said after she calmed down. She said, "I should go. My husband is waiting, and we need to get to the police station." But as she turned to leave, she couldn't get rid of the thought that something wasn't right. Evangelist Matthew's reaction to Eugene's picture, the strange hug, and the glimpse of the picture in his pocket were all things that made her think of danger. But she had to be being crazy. Many churches across the country looked up to this man of God. Even so, Rachel felt cold as she walked out of the church that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Rachel ran through her thoughts as she left the church and into the warm afternoon sun. It wasn't easy to get rid of the doubt that had grown inside, even if it seemed crazy to other people, especially Daniel. She saw her husband sitting in their rental car with the door to the driver's side open to let some fresh air in. His face was roaring with anger, and she prepared herself for it. Daniel asked her as she walked up, "What took you so long? You wasted 30 minutes on this side trip." "The police are waiting for us," Rachel said as she got into the driver's seat. She left the door open, though. "Daniel, you won't believe who I just met inside." Evangelist Matthew, the one who visited our church in Pine Hollow about 2 years ago. Right before Eugene disappeared, Daniel wasn't pleased. "So there's something off about him," Rachel insisted. Her voice lowered even though she was the only one in the car. "When I hugged him, he held me too tight, like he was, I don't know, smelling me or something. And he had a photograph in his pocket. I only saw it for a second, but the silhouette looked like Eugene." Daniel started. Rachel, his tone, made it sound like he was about to brush off her worries. "I know how it sounds," she said, "but I'm not imagining things." When I showed him Eugene's picture, he reacted strangely. He seemed startled. Daniel's face softened a little as he realized how serious her voice was. "We've worked together at church for many years. We know that preachers like him are looked up to. A lot of people would be shocked if what you say is true. If you want to make a charge, you need to be sure of it." Rachel made it clear, "I'm not saying I'm sure. That being said, something doesn't seem right." Daniel rubbed his temples, showing that he was torn between being there for his wife and staying calm. "Let's do what we planned and go to the police station. They want to see us. We can work this out there. If your suspicions are correct, they will know what to do next." Rachel reluctantly agreed. "That's right. Since the cops are there, we can always ask Pastor Graham for the evangelist's contact information at a later time if we need to." Before they could keep talking, the doors to the church opened, and Preacher Matthew came in. He said something about coming back before the evening service as he waved goodbye to Pastor Graham. Then he saw Rachel and Daniel and waved hello as he walked to his car, which was parked next to theirs. As Matthew opened the door to his car, Rachel smelled a sweet vanilla scent that she knew right away. Jean's favorite scent. Rachel had given it to her for Christmas the year before she went missing. Eugene wore it every day and loved the way it made her smell like an adult. Rachel's blood froze. This can't just happen by chance. Matthew pulled his car out of the parking spot and drove off, as if he didn't know what he was about to tell Rachel. "Get in the car, Daniel," Rachel yelled, already getting back into the driver's seat. She told Daniel, "Close the door." He did what she said, confused by her sudden sternness. "What is it?" Rachel asked, her hands firmly on the driving wheel. Didn't you smell that? Smell what? That vanilla smell hit him when he opened the door to his car. Daniel looked at his wife with worry in his eyes as he said, "That's Eugene's perfume. I gave it to her, and she wore it every day." Rachel, you're connecting dots that might not be there. Vanilla is an extremely common scent. It could be his daughter's perfume, or his wife's, or even an air freshener. Rachel turned the key in the car. "I feel a call in my heart about this, Daniel. A strong one. I need to follow it and go where? Chase after a respected evangelist based on a smell? I just want to confirm it," Rachel said. Daniel threw up his hands in frustration and said, "If I'm wrong, I'll admit it, and we'll go straight to the police station as planned. But I need to do this." It hurt to hear Daniel say that, because it was coming from him. Now you're spiritualizing everything. This is exactly how false prophets gain followers in this country. People following their gut feelings and calls instead of reason. Rachel backed out of the parking spot with her jaw set, determined. He frowned and turned to look out the window. "I'm not claiming to be a prophet. I'm a mother who's worked in church administration long enough to know when something doesn't add up with a pastor. Okay, do what you want, but don't say I didn't warn you when you look silly because of this wild goose chase." Rachel pulled on a mole street, following the evangelist's path. The car was suddenly silent. She was afraid of both being right and being wrong, which made her heart race. If she was wrong, she was just taking too long to meet with the cops. But she might have been right, and they might finally find Eugene. Rachel tightened her grip on the driving wheel and kept going with her gut, because it was a mother's gut that wouldn't be quieted. Rachel carefully stayed behind Evangelist Matthew's car, making sure they were also far enough away for him not to notice them. As Daniel sat next to her in stony quiet, his arms crossed over his chest, it was clear that he didn't agree with her. His words, "This is ridiculous," came out after a while. "It's a waste of time to call the police when all we have are your suspicions and a vanilla smell. Please bear with me," Rachel begged, her eyes fixed on the evangelist's sedan. She said, "If I'm wrong, I'll never do something like this again." They followed the car into a residential area where the homes were bigger and farther apart than where their Airbnb was. Finally, Matthew pulled into the driveway of a nice-looking two-story house with a yard that had been well taken care of. Outside, there was an Airbnb sign. Rachel drove slowly by and then parked around the corner so that they could still see the house without drawing attention to themselves. Then she turned off the engine and waited. Daniel was getting impatient and asked, "Now what?" "Simple. Now we watch," Rachel said. Matthew got out of his car and shut the door behind him as he entered the house. As the minutes went by, Rachel and Daniel sat in their stopped car in silence. The tension between them grew. Though it seemed like forever, the front door opened again after what seemed like a very long time. There was a woman who came out with 2 big bags and put them in Matthew's car's trunk. She was in her mid-30s and had her dark hair pulled back into a bun that looked like it belonged on a businesswoman. She went back inside the house and didn't come out until a short time later with a smaller suitcase for a kid. He said he was leaving New York tonight after the service, Rachel said in a low voice, as if the woman could hear them from over here. After going back inside, the woman came back out with a little girl soon after. The child had blonde hair pulled back into neat pigtails and looked to be 8 or 9 years old. When Evangelist Matthew walked in behind her, the girl kissed him on the cheek, and he gave her a short hug before waving goodbye. Rachel tried very hard to see her face as the girl turned to walk to the car with the woman. It was not Eugene, though. Everything about it was wrong. Eugene was not nearly as big as he is now, after 2 years. Daniel said softly, but not with victory. Rachel's hope went away like a bubble that has been popped. That must be his daughter. Just like he said, she was sure beyond a doubt that her gut was telling her to go with Eugene. Just as Daniel had said she would, she now felt stupid. She whispered, "I'm sorry," as tears came to her eyes. Daniel put his hand on her arm and said, "I really thought I was so sure." His face relaxed. "It's okay. You're a mother looking for a child. Anyone would be grasping at straws in your shoes." Rachel nodded, but she couldn't say anything else because she had a lump in her throat. Had she thought about what the picture she saw in the vanilla smell meant? Because she was sad and desperate, did she make links where none existed? Daniel gently said, "Let's switch seats," she said. "I'll drive us to the police station." They got out of the car, and switched places, with Rachel slumping into the passenger seat, emotionally worn out from the ups and downs of hope and sadness. Daniel turned on the car, but he didn't put it in gear right away. "Rachel, I need you to set Google Maps to the police station." "I have no idea where we are." Rachel took out her phone and put in the address very slowly. The well-known blue line showed up and led them back to where they were going. Rachel kept her eyes on the evangelist's house until she could no longer see it as Daniel started to drive. She kept having the thought that she had missed something important, that she was still missing a piece of the puzzle. For now, though, she had to accept that her theories were wrong. They should go ahead with their plan to meet with the cops again, because they might be able to help them find Eugene. Rachel put her head against the window and watched the strange New York scenery go by. 2 years of looking, following leads that didn't lead anywhere, and putting up with friends and family who had given up hope a long time ago. She was completely worn out from it. However, she couldn't give up. She couldn't accept that Eugene might never come home. It was trust or a strong desire to protect their daughter that drove them across the country in the small chance that they would find her. Even after this latest setback, Rachel knew she would keep following it wherever it led for as long as it took, because a mother never stopped looking for her kid. Never. Rachel kept an eye on the road and was still waiting for the evangelist car. So far, it looked like they were all going the same way, away from the neighborhoods and back toward the main roads. Rachel quickly said, "Look," pointing ahead. "They're turning." Daniel sighed and slowed down a bit as he watched the van carrying the woman and the girl turn into what looked like a playground with a cafe attached. By looking through the chain-link fence, Rachel could see a group of kids waiting outside. Rachel told Daniel, "Slow down more, I want to see what's going on," she said. "No," Daniel said strongly, speeding up instead. Rachel was trying to see as much as possible as they drove past the playground. "No more side missions, Rachel. We're already late for our appointment with the police. We're going straight there now." She caught a glimpse of the woman meeting another adult and the little girl starting to wait with a group of kids. But then they were gone, and the scene behind them was gone. Her hope dropped again, and she slouched back in her chair. He cut him off, his knuckles white on the driving wheel. "Daniel, I'm sorry, but Rachel, we need to learn from this. Gut feelings can be wrong. They can make us see connections that aren't there." Rachel didn't say anything because she knew he was right, but couldn't get rid of the feeling that they had missed something important. It was more than just the vanilla smell, the picture, or the bags. Even though she was sure, she knew Daniel and the cops would not believe her without proof. They drove in tense quiet for a while before Daniel spoke again, this time in a softer voice. "I understand how much you want to find her. I do too. But we need to be careful and work with the police," she said. "I know," Rachel whispered as she looked out the window. It had been almost an hour since their appointment time when they finally got to the police office. They walked into the busy area and went up to the front desk officer. "We have an appointment with Detective Morris about our missing daughter, Eugene Warren." "I'm afraid we're a little late," Daniel said. The officer looked at his computer and then looked up with a sorry face. "I'm sorry, but Detective Morris has to go to another meeting right now because you didn't show up at the time you were supposed to." Daniel gave Rachel a mean look and then turned back to the officer. When asked how long it would be until he was free, the cop said, "Probably a few hours. You're welcome to wait. Or you could come back later." Daniel thanked him and led Rachel back outside, showing all over his body how angry he was. When they got outside, he asked, "See what happens when we waste time?" Rachel said, "Now we have hours to kill." Rachel agreed and didn't argue. "Really, Daniel? I'm sorry." His face softened a little when she told him she was sorry. The officer mentioned there's a diner nearby. "I haven't eaten since breakfast, and I'm guessing you haven't either. You go ahead," Rachel said. Daniel was clearly torn between staying with her and giving her room. "I think I need to walk around a bit to clear my head. There are some interesting buildings around here," she said. He finally gave a nod. "Okay, take your phone and stay in touch. I'll text you when the detective is ready to meet us," she said. Rachel watched Daniel walk across the street to the diner, his shoulders sagging from carrying their load. She felt bad about leading everyone on a wild goose chase. Because they were late and missed their meeting, she put him down, giving him hope only to have it dashed. But even though she felt guilty, the suspicion was still there. It was too much for her to handle. Not yet. Rachel got up and started walking, letting her feet take her where they wanted to go. During the middle of the day, the streets around the police station were full of people, but she barely paid attention to them. Her thoughts were filled with what had happened in the morning. She took out her phone and opened Google Maps again, going back to the street view picture that started the whole thing. The woman with the pink jacket and the man who was walking next to her. She zoomed in as far as the distorted picture would let her and looked at every detail. Something about how the man stood, how he held himself. She was sure it was Matthew the evangelist. She became more sure of herself as she looked at the picture more. Rachel called a number from her contacts list without thinking about it. Melissa, a woman from Pine Hollow who worked at the church and had known her for years. The third ring went through to Rachel, which Melissa answered. Is everything okay? Have you found Eugene yet? Rachel asked as she continued to walk. But I need your help. Do you remember Evangelist Matthew? He visited our church about 2 years ago, right before Eugene disappeared. Of course I remember him. The healing service was incredible. I need you to find everything you can about him, Rachel said. His background, his seminary education, anything you can dig up. Also, that woman in the wheelchair who was healed, what was her name? Can you find her contact information? She filled out a visitor card, and we recorded her testimony afterward. I can look through the archives, Melissa said. But what's this about? Asked Rachel. I'm not sure yet, but I've run into the evangelist here in New York, and something doesn't feel right. Call it intuition. I'll see what I can find and call you back, she said. Be careful, Rachel. Rachel hung up the phone and kept walking, turning her eyes around more carefully now. As she walked by a few impressive buildings, her interest in architecture temporarily took over from her disturbed thoughts. At a crossroads, she saw a big building that caught her eye. Outside, there was a sign that said it was a Lutheran school, and there was a huge green yard next to it. Rachel walked across the street to get a better look at the building. From what she had seen, Catholic monasteries were more popular than Lutheran dorms. She took out her phone and took some pictures of the interesting building. She might want to go to the office for the dorms and ask about its past. It would keep them busy while they wait for Detective Morris to show up. As she got closer to the door, a familiar car pulled into the parking lot of the building. Rachel froze in place as her heart jumped in her throat. The car belonged to Evangelist Matthew, but Matthew wasn't driving it. It was actually the woman from the Airbnb. Rachel, the little blonde girl who could be seen in the passenger's seat, hid behind a big bush and watched as the woman parked and got out of the car. She stood next to the car with the door open, as if she were waiting for something. A few minutes later, a dormitory keeper wearing a dress that looked like that of a Lutheran nun came out of the building with a small group of kids. Every kid had a small bag like the one Rachel had seen the woman load into the car earlier. The girls lined up next to the car while the woman helped them put their bags in the trunk. Rachel saw 5 kids, and they all looked to be between 7 and 12 years old. Then, after 2 years of frantic prayers, Rachel saw Eugene. It was like a miracle. Her daughter's face was older than the ones on the missing person posters, but still clear. Rachel could tell her from a picture because of her eyes, mouth, and the small dimple in her cheek when she smiled. Rachel couldn't breathe, move, or think for a moment. She stared at her daughter, who was still living and only a few yards away after 2 years of searching. Time seemed to stop. Rachel grabbed her phone and called Daniel, but her hands were shaking. Rachel, he answered right away. She finally got out, Daniel, even though her voice was shaking. I found her. I found Eugene. Get the car and come to me now. I'm sharing my location. What? Where are you? She hung up the phone and quickly told Daniel where she was, then turned her attention back to what was happening in the parking lot. It's her, Daniel. I'm sure of it. She's getting into a car with that woman from the evangelist's house. Please hurry and call the police. The woman was getting the kids ready to leave by leading them into the car. Rachel didn't want to wait for Daniel or the cops. Eugene was in that car, and if it drove off, she might lose her daughter again. Rachel took a big breath, got out of hiding, and ran toward the group, calling out, Eugene! Eugene! As she went. The woman in the car saw her coming and was scared. She quickly told the kids to get inside and shut the doors. She quickly got into the driver's seat and thanked the person who was watching the room and looking confused by all the noise. Rachel jumped into the car and slammed on the window before the woman could start the engine. She looked back and saw her daughter sitting in the back seat. Eugene's face changed from being confused to shocked. She rolled down the window with her eyes wide open. Eugene asked in a confused voice, "Did God bring my mom back to life?" He then looked at the woman in the driver's seat. The woman began to speak, but Rachel had already opened the back door and taken Eugene in her arms. Because she missed the feeling so much, even though it was normal, it made her cry. "It's really me, sweetheart," Rachel told her daughter in a soft voice. "I'm still alive, and I've been looking for you every day since you went missing," she told the person who ran the dorm. Daniel walked up to the scene and asked, "What's going on here?" Rachel looked up, her arms still around Eugene, as if she thought she might disappear again if she let go. "This is my daughter. She was taken from our home in Idaho 2 years ago, and we've been looking for her ever since." The person who ran the hall looked pale when Rachel said that. She looked back and forth between Rachel, Eugene, and the woman in the driver's seat. "I don't get it. These kids are in Pastor Matthew's ministry. He's taking care of them because they are orphans." Before Rachel could answer, a car slammed into the garage door. Daniel jumped out and quickly looked around until he saw Rachel holding the girl together. He yelled, "Eugene," and his voice broke with emotion. Eugene turned around when she heard the sound, her eyes getting really big. Daniel ran over and hugged Rachel and Eugene tightly, his body shaking with sobs that they couldn't be heard. "Dad, you're alive too. You found her," he told Rachel in a low voice. "You actually found her." The woman in the driver's seat shut her door and looked like she was on the phone, probably with the preacher. Her movements were shaky and rushed. It was clear that she was going to leave with the other kids still in the car when she started the engine. When Daniel got out of the hug, he walked to the front of the car and slammed his fist on the hood. He yelled, "Don't you dare move this car." His face turned red with anger. Several cop cars rushed to the scene of Daniel's call for help, and the sound of their sirens filled the air. Officers came out with their guns drawn and quickly assessed the dangerous situation. "Police, everyone stay where you are," yelled a carefully approaching officer. Daniel put up his hands to show he wasn't dangerous. Police quickly took over the scene and helped the other scared kids get out of the car. "My name is Daniel Warren. That's my wife, Rachel. We just found our daughter, Eugene, who was kidnapped 2 years ago. This woman," he pointed to the driver, "is involved in her abduction." The person who worked in the room tried to calm them down, but it was clear that he or she was just as shocked as the kids were. She admitted she's the evangelist's assistant. A police officer told Rachel and Daniel as they stood guard over Eugene. Says these children are part of his ministry and discipleship program, but not his biological children. They're kept here at the dormitory during his tour service. Rachel kept Eugene close. "This is my missing daughter, and these other children, they're likely taken from their families too." The cops gave grim nods. "We'll need to confirm that at the station." Officers checked each child to make sure none of them were hurt before making plans to take them to the police station. The person who was in charge of the room agreed to go with them and told her staff that she would be gone. A police officer asked, "Where's the evangelist now?" "He's resting at the Airbnb," she said, her face showing worry. "He told me to take Mila and the other kids with his luggage somewhere near the airport. He said he'd meet us after the evening service." Rachel quickly talked about her earlier conversation with the evangelist at church, including her suspicions that led her here. The police coordinated with a backup team to go to the evangelist's Airbnb and arrest him. "We're coming with you," Daniel insisted, putting his arm around Eugene to protect her. The police agreed, but made it clear that the family would have to stay in the police car. Eugene wouldn't leave Rachel's side, clinging to her mother as if she was afraid she would disappear again. The other kids and the person who ran the dorm were put in different cars and sent to the police station. As they drove away, Rachel held her daughter close, barely daring to believe that their nightmare was finally over. When they got to the evangelist's Airbnb, there were already several police cars around the property. From the window of their police car, Rachel watched as officers led the handcuffed evangelist out of the house and toward a waiting patrol car. As they passed, they briefly looked at each other, and Rachel felt a chill run through her. The picture she had seen earlier fell out of the evangelist's pocket and onto the ground. An officer picked it up and brought it to Rachel and Daniel to show them. It was a portrait of Eugene, and there were also pictures of other children. At the police station, Rachel looked at her phone while Eugene was being gently questioned by a female officer in a room just for child witnesses. She had a missed call from Melissa, who works at the same church in Pine Hollow as Rachel. She left the room to make the call, but she could still see Eugene through the door that led to the room. "Hi, Melissa. This is Rachel. Rachel, I hope this message finds you well. Some of the things I learned about Evangelist Matthew made me uncomfortable. He said he finished religious school, but it looks like he never did. The details he emailed us must have been fake, so we didn't notice that when we checked him out before his visit. And I would question whether or not that woman, the first-time visitor in a wheelchair, was really getting better. After Evangelist Matthew left, she never came back to our church." Rachel wasn't shocked. She thought the same thing would happen. "We found Eugene. Oh, thank God. She's safe with us now," came the gasp from the other end of the call. "What does this have to do with the preacher, though?" "She was taken by him," Rachel said in a low voice. "There are other kids, too. The story is still being looked into by the police." "That's horrible," Melissa said in a whisper. "I looked into it more and learned that his real name is Derek Lanton. When I looked up that name, I found a background that was very different from what he told us." "Derek Lanton," Rachel said over and over, her tongue hurting. "He used the church's reputation to get close to kids who were weak, and we let him and you couldn't." "Rachel, none of us could." After the call ended, Rachel did a quick search on the internet for the name Derek Lanton. The results confirmed what Melissa had said. The man they knew as Evangelist Matthew had the same face as Derek Lanton, a man who has been charged with fraud in other states. Rachel went back to the family room and told Daniel what she had learned. "I feel responsible," she said. "I was the one who checked his credentials before we invited him to speak at our church. I should have done a better job." Daniel shook his head and said, "Rachel, this isn't your fault. He and other con artists are very good at tricking people. He said he was who he said he was, so you had no reason to doubt him." "No, it was all my fault," Rachel said. Daniel saw how upset she was and put his hand on her shoulder to calm her. "God, let us hear. What was meant to hurt has become good," he said in a soft voice. Before they could say anything else, Detective Morris walked in. He was a serious-looking man in his 50s with kind eyes that belied his serious face. Eugene stood next to him. Detective Morris led the family to a private room and joined them there. He sat down across from them and started. "Mr. and Mrs. Warren, first, let me say how happy I am that you found your daughter. This kind of case doesn't usually end so well. After the baptism class, I was walking with my friends, but we split up at the corner," she said. "Father Matthew," that's what he made us call him, appeared in his car and told me Mom and Dad had been in a terrible accident. Eugene agreed to tell them everything in person, even though she had already told us everything that had happened since she went missing. I believed him because our family is religious, and I thought priests always told the truth," Eugene said. Rachel's heart clenched. "I saw pictures of my parents and the graves at the funeral he took me to." "A fake funeral?" Rachel whispered, shocked by the elaborate lie. Eugene nodded, tears in her eyes. "I couldn't believe it when I saw you today," Father Matthew said. "I'll only see you again in heaven, but I prayed every day for you to come back." Eugene told her what the man had done to her. He would let us go to his room one at a time. We played board games and watched movies. He told us we were there to see how strong his faith in God was. For the rest of the interview, Rachel and Daniel talked about what happened. Rachel said she found Eugene through a mix of luck, intuition, and persistence. Detective Morris said they had found that Matthew, or rather Derek Lanton, was a charismatic but manipulative predator who took advantage of people's trust in religious figures. He seems to have taken children while traveling between churches. He must have used fake credentials, the detective said. "We'll be looking into it thoroughly." "What will happen next? What's going on?" Daniel asked, putting his arm around Eugene to keep him safe. "We've arrested Evangelist Matthew, whose real name is Derek Lanton, and his assistant, Carla Benson. They're being charged with kidnapping, fraud, identity theft, and endangering a child." "What about the other kids?" Rachel asked, remembering the scared faces she'd seen in the dorm. "We're looking through databases and calling their families," Morris reassured them. They're from all over the country, so reuniting them will take some time, but Eugene is very lucky because her family found her. Daniel said he was sorry for calling Rachel a false prophet and doubting her earlier. Rachel smiled at the memory. We shouldn't lose faith just because one priest was a bad person, she said softly. That doesn't mean all churches are bad in the end. It was a church that helped us find our daughter again. When someone knocked on the door, Pastor Graham stood there with a worried look on his face. I hope I'm not intruding, he said hesitantly. Detective Morris invited him in, and the pastor walked up to the family with his hands clasped in front of him. I wanted to come personally to express how deeply sorry I am for what happened, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We had no idea that we were harboring such evil in our midst. We've canceled tonight's service, of course. This wasn't your fault either, Pastor, Rachel said, surprising herself by forgiving herself. He lied to everyone. A noise outside caught their attention. Through the family room's glass wall, they could see police carrying Matthew's brother Derek across the station in handcuffs. Rachel felt a chill go down her spine as she saw how empty those eyes were. Pastor Graham spoke up again. If you're staying in the area, I'd like to invite you to our prayer service next Sunday. Our church will be proud to celebrate Eugene's return with you, and your story might give hope to people who are still looking for their loved ones. Rachel looked at Daniel and said, We'd be honored. After all, it was a church that helped us find our daughter again. Later, as they sat in their Airbnb together, Eugene slept peacefully between them for the first time in 2 years. Rachel thought about how a random tip, an image on Google Maps, and a mother's intuition that wouldn't be ignored had all come together to make the miracle they had prayed for. I'm sorry I doubted you, Daniel said softly, being careful not to wake Eugene. When you saw her on Google Maps and insisted on following Matthew's car, you were right the whole time. Rachel smiled and brushed something from Eugene's forehead. Faith comes in many forms. Sometimes it's about believing in what you can't see and trusting what you know in your heart to be true, even if other people don't believe it. Daniel reached across to take Rachel's hand while their daughter slept. Our faith was tested in ways I never thought possible. I almost lost mine, but I didn't, Rachel said. You were still beside me, still searching, still hoping, Daniel replied. Because of you, your strength carried us both. It was quiet and peaceful, and they could only hear Eugene's steady breathing. Each of them was thinking about the amazing trip that had brought them here, a journey of loss and discovery, doubt and faith, and finally, a journey of a family made whole again against all odds.